Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to the Mayor's Corner, where we discuss all things Wilmington. Tonight, our special guest is none other than the Mayor of the City of Wilmington, Mike Purzycki. Mayor Purzycki, how are you this evening?
I'm well, Ashley. Good to see you.
Always good to see you. So I want to start out with first discussing, you've been a champion for the people of Wilmington since you took office.
I hope so.
You have. Creating opportunities for those most often overlooked in particular. Yesterday, history was made when Joe Biden announced his vice presidential pick,
Right.
Kamala Harris, a Black woman and an HBCU alum. Similarly, you chose a Black woman and an HBCU alum to be your chief of staff. Can you tell me why it was important for you to choose a woman of color to help you run the city of Wilmington?
Well, I think symbolically it's important, but you should know that I picked Tanny Washington because she was clearly the best candidate for that job. She's an outstanding individual. She's a dedicated professional. She's highly experienced, and it would have been a terrible mistake not to select her. So I appreciate the fact that she's African American. She brings a perspective to my job every single day that I don't know about. If I had a nickel for every time she said, "Mayor, you can't say it like that," and of course I would get nickels from you for saying the same thing, right? You know, what happens is your attitudes are derived from your experiences in life. Your belief systems are derived from your experiences and then your knowledge that you get, and you need people with a different perspective. And so what's been invaluable about Tanny, not only just her talents, but her perspective that she brings. And to me, that's critically important. And I might add that it's great that we've got an HBCU alum, a Howard alum, and I know you love the idea that she's from Mecca, as are you. I think it's a fantastic symbol for America, by the way, to see essentially the Harvard, if you will, I hope I'm saying that right, basically what is the tantamount to being a Harvard for an HBCU. And it's just a great school with a great list of alums. And so to have her featured every day in the news of this country, to see what the product of our HBCUs is really good for that and the great program we have promoting HBCUs in the city.
I would agree. And not only that, to take it a step further, here locally for our constituent base in the city of Wilmington, young brown and Black girls all over the city can look to you and your administration and say, I see Black women in leadership roles. And we can look on a global level, on the federal level, and see that Kamala Harris, who could potentially be the vice president of the United States, representation matters so much. So now we have an entire group of young African American women who can now say here in Wilmington and hopefully in the White House that they can do and be the same exact thing. So you should congratulate yourself for setting that kind of example for young women all over the state.
I'm the beneficiary, believe me.
Yeah, and I also want to talk about, one of the things that you made a commitment to do when you took office was to make sure that your administration looked like the constituent base in which it served. So what you did was you hired a ton of Black and brown women in your administration. And not only did you hire them, but they play key decision-making roles in your administration, from HR to L&I, your chief of staff. Why was it important to you to have that kind of diversity when it came to decision-making roles?
I think it's similar to the first answer. It brings great perspective. You will remember that when you were my administrative assistant some time back, it was me and 7 African-American women surrounding me every day, telling me what was a different point of view. And, it just made me grow so much as mayor to realize that my perspective was not the only one. I mean, I think intellectually I always knew that, but you kind of get confident in your views because you've had this long life of experiences, and therefore you think you've got it figured out, and then you see some 35-year-old comes up and says, let me tell you, you do not have it figured out. Let me tell you what the real world is. And so to me, it's enlightening, but it's ennobling. It just makes you a better person.
Yeah, and I would be remiss if I did not mention, it looks like a lot of governmental agencies and corporations across the country, in response to the civil unrest, have been scrambling to diversify their administration or their workforce. And some would say that you were ahead of your time. When you came in 2017, it was a priority without any push or resistance or any force from anybody in the community. So I think that's very important to focus on because you had that forethought before you took office.
Well, it's funny because I always want to tell people the things I've said, the things I've written, the things we did all happened before George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And you made that observation one day. And I'm very proud of that. You don't like to feel like you're in the middle of everybody reacting to this circumstance. All of a sudden, everybody's finding religion. All of a sudden, all these corporate guys are running around scrambling to see if they can find young black talent to hire so they can say, we got the message. I really believe we had the message a long, long time ago, and we started there. But I must tell you that sometimes it's hard to convince people because people look at me and they still don't trust me. I can't, this is my uniform. I get the corporate look and that's just kind of who I am. At my age, this is the way we dress. This is the way we behave. This is where we act. And so it took a while before people start to say, I'm starting to know his heart a little bit. He's really a pretty decent guy. I hope so anyway.
Yeah, I would agree. I want to talk about your fiscal leadership in the city of Wilmington. Mm-hmm. During the pandemic and post the pandemic, I would assume, we don't know when it's going to be over, a lot of different governmental agencies and corporations, they're not doing so well.
No.
But correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like we're doing fairly well here in the city of Wilmington.
Well, we're holding our own. Like everyone else, we had a projected loss of revenue because with everybody closing up, that just affects our wage tax. Our receivables get higher because people can't pay their bills. And so we projected about an $8 million reduction in revenue, and we put together a strategy to pick up that loss of revenue. If it goes much farther than that, it's going to be a little harder for us. We're going to have to start being much more creative. But we do have a little bit of room, I think, to survive more of a downturn. But in the middle of all this, Moody's, a bond rating agency, removed what was called a negative outlook that had been there prior because it was there because we didn't have as much cash reserve as they'd like. Here we are in the middle of a pandemic, and we never believed for a second that we'd get rid of that, and they removed the negative outlook, and I think it was a great compliment to our fiscal management.
Oh yeah,
I think so. We feel pretty good about things.
Yeah.
Look, we're not immune to the problems of the world. So if this gets much worse, then we're going to have to really scramble to keep things together. But we'll make hard decisions. And frankly, we're supposed to make hard decisions. Mm-hmm. Anybody can make the easy decisions.
Yeah. Speaking of hard decisions, you made a very bold decision when you chose to hire a police chief, not from Wilmington, but one that worked in Chicago and in New York.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through that decision-making process and tell me what accomplishments you've seen in the city of Wilmington since Chief Tracy has come on board?
Yeah, I think if there is I had two great hires, but the two best were Tanny Washington and Bob Tracy. And I often say, there's probably a better police chief in the country, but there's not a better police chief for Wilmington in the country. He's the hardest working guy. He's a consummate professional. He has brought systems to our public safety department that we've never employed before. It's essentially data-driven policing. The data tell us where to go and how to go. And it showed enormous results for 2 years in a row. 2017, he got here in 2017, and that year turned out to be one of the most violent years in the city's recent history. And 2018 and 2019, crime plummeted by 40 and 50%. I mean, we put up remarkable numbers. So we're really happy. 2020 comes, and we have social unrest. We have the pandemic. We have a criminal justice system which can't function as a result of the COVID-19 problems. We've got our prisons turning people out because they're trying to lessen their population because of COVID. And all of a sudden, we've got a spike in crime that is really troubling. But it is happening in city after city throughout America, and everybody's trying to figure it out. And I think it's a confluence of those events that COVID creates a problem the social unrest has created kind of an attitude that that people have a sense of grieving about any number of things, and this gives you kind of a I don't want to say a green light to behave wrong. I think it just creates an environment where people don't feel typically very structured in their way or disciplined in their behaviors, and before you know it, they're doing things that are really disruptive. And I might say, what is so deeply troubling is it's more and more by younger kids. So we have 22% of all the gun arrests last year, this current year, 22% have been by kids under 17 years old, 17 or younger, and many times they're multiple offenders. So we have a 15-year-old carrying a 9mm handgun, and nobody wants to put him in prison. The argument is over whether to put him in an adult prison or a juvenile detention facility. Both have their advantages and disadvantages, but meanwhile, there are too many people saying, let's put them back out again and monitor them, and the truth is that's not working, because these kids come out, they're young, they're developing, and then they go right back to what got them angry to begin with. They go grab a gun and they go shoot somebody else. And we have to come together as a community, resolve to reject the behaviors so these kids don't get reinforced by their community. We have to get the criminal justice system to realize that nobody wants to punish young kids, but these young kids are lethal in their state of mind with the tools they have at their disposal, firearms, and that they're killing and hurting one another. If you send a kid out on the street with a gun, he's going to shoot himself, he's going to shoot someone else, or someone's going to shoot him. And we can't accept that.
Yeah, I would agree. And one thing I've noticed across the nation is community policing has become increasingly popular. How would you describe the relationship from your vantage point from the Wilmington Police Department and the constituents here in the city of Wilmington?
So in prior years, we had a community policing division or department. We had, I forget what unit of they used for it, but they essentially had a community policing group, and so it was a fairly small group, and they bounced all around the city. And the chief's view of the world is we're all community policemen, everybody. And so when there's a community meeting, and of course COVID again has just stopped all those meetings except for a Zoom meeting, but command staff, captains and above, were required to go to every single meeting. So when people complained about what was going on in the community, you had a captain, sometimes an inspector, and oftentimes the chief there to listen to people talk about what they had. I think people you always hear the people say you don't have enough police officers on the street. We still need them to be there and talking. Sometimes an officer by himself doesn't want to go walking around in the middle of a place that they feel uncomfortable with, so they're not out there. But I would say that for the most part, there's much more contact with members of the public than in years past. And I think my sense is that the esteem that the public has for the police department is very, very high.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the community, you established under your administration back in 2017 the Clean Teams Project, and a lead on that effort, Dr. Alton Williams, described you as an ally for your commitment to making sure our neighborhoods were clean and safe. What would you say are the improvements that you've seen since that initiative has been implemented?
Well, it's not just what I've seen, it's what I hear from everybody, that, if you live in that neighborhood and you wake up in the morning, your block is clean as can be, because these are 6 neighborhoods where for 4 hours each morning, 5 or 6 individuals are going through your whole community and collecting literally, oh golly, I can't remember how many, but 20, 30 bags of trash walking around a fairly small area. Sadly, and inexcusably, I might add, the next morning the trash is back again. So we haven't created, that culture where people just say there's junk on the street, let's pick it up and toss it in the trash some way. Mm-hmm. But I think it's so valuable especially because what we're trying to do is create an environment where young people wake up in the morning and they learn their habits. Mm-hmm. And you wake up in the morning and your place is filthy, you just throw stuff on the ground. I mean, it happens. There's that old Disney World thing where, if there's trash on the ground, people throw it on the ground. But down there, they pick that stuff up instantly, and then people stop throwing it on the ground because you look down, you see a perfectly clean place. You don't want to do that. Well, So, but what we have, and which is so unique, is that the people who do the cleaning are from that neighborhood. So we tend to use a church or a nonprofit from that area. So they've got recruits from that area. So what they're doing is this is not just a job. It's a little bit of a mission for them. They're cleaning their own neighborhood, their own homes. And there's a great deal of pride in it. When you talk to Dr. Williams, I'm sure he conveyed to you how proud people are of the work they do in the city. And look, this is the most basic of blocking and tackling. Our city has to be clean and attractive. It's got to be safe. Our housing's got to be up to standards. You can't have kids raised in squalor. There's no excuse. There can be no defense for it. And if I can jump to another subject, which you may want to get to later, we tried to get legislation to allow us to really enforce the code against landlords, and we got pushback for no reason other than what I think is just political resistance. If I'm for it, then we have a bunch of people against it. But we can't have housing that is so deteriorated that children live in this and start to see themselves as no better than somebody who should be living in a place like this. And the same way, when we cleaned up all of our community centers and our parks, the message we sent was, you're so valuable that you get the best community center in the city. You have such value that Eden Park is the most beautiful football field in the city, and the picnic area is beautiful. And that's the subliminal message that we want our children to get, instead of the complete opposite, which is you can't have value, because why would anybody of value live in a place that's such a dump? And so to me, that's the message that we have to continue to try to send. And it takes some political courage, but we had a lack of it on our council this year. We could never get 7 votes. We had some very courageous work by some of our members of council. We just couldn't get it done. So that's for next year.
Yeah, very unfortunate. And to add on to that, you invested unprecedented amounts of money into our city parks for our children and our streets. It was very important for you to make sure that kids in our inner city neighborhoods had a safe and clean place to play. What sparked that drive in you to make sure that our parks and our streets were well taken care of?
Yeah. So first of all, I think, you know me by now, if we have anything or do anything, it's got to be done at a high level, period. So the lobby of the city county building is beautiful after looking like a cave when we first got there. It was just so old and tired since the 70s. So we did that over, and it's beautiful. And I think it sends the message when you walk in the building that excellence lives here. And so when we go to our community centers, I want our kids to walk in there and see a really attractive facility. And so we did it, and we put glass on the front. We covered up all the massive brick that made it look like it was a prison. There's some risk to that, but in the end, we wanted our kids to feel that this is a place that is a welcoming place, not a place that people should be afraid of. We had this huge security desk when you first went in there, which made you feel like you were going into Gander Hill, not into a community center. So we just took it out. Eden Park was just a big mud hole. Now it's a beautiful facility. It really is, with stands on both sides, lighting for night games, big scoreboard donated by Wendell Smallwood, by the way, a wonderful man who is a champion of our kids who grew up in Riverside. So, no, I think you'll find that throughout the city, our neighborhood parks, and then our road construction. We had 26 miles of road done this year since March, working with DelDOT. But I think in total, we've got about 41 or 42 miles since we got here of road. In a city, that's a lot of road construction. But the whole idea is that you create your foundation for the future by building your infrastructure. So when you come out the other side, we want to start getting jobs for people. It's not then when you say, oh, darn it, the roads are too bad, nobody wants to come here. Just get all your roads finished, get your infrastructure finished. And by the way, make your neighborhoods more attractive, and then all this stuff falls into place.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you've demonstrated throughout your tenure in this first term that you are a man for your people here in the city of Wilmington, and I think it should be appreciated. And we've gone over, all of your accomplishments, or some of them. There's more. But I'd like to touch on one other thing. What have your biggest disappointments been since you took office in 2017?
Yeah, the biggest disappointment is failure to deal with this housing issue, because for all the talk people have about the lack of really nice housing in the city, half of our housing stocks are owned by investor landlords. Half. 75% of all of our complaints and all of our fines are imposed against landlords. So if you look around your neighborhood and you see a bunch of substandard houses that really run down the value of your property, statistically, your problem is not homeowners, it's landlords. Homeowners can come to the city and ask for a grant to help them with a facade improvement or other loans and grants that they can get for a homeowner, because we recognize everybody's not in a position to fix up an older home. But we're not doing that for landlords who profit by this. They have an obligation. When you decide to go in business in our city, you've got to take care of your property. And it was a terrible frustration. There was nothing logical about this. I had people come in and tell me why they were against it. They hadn't even read the bill. They had no idea people would walk in and say, you're going to throw little old ladies out of their houses. Until I was blue in the face, I said, it doesn't apply to homeowners. It only applies to investors and landlords. So we're going to have a change of council, and I'm confident we're going to get a council that's going to help us in that regard. But that was one of the big disappointments. The politics in the city is kind of bruising. That's a little exhausting, because if people said to me, you want to do this and we want to do that, let's have a discussion about it, fine. But if you want to do this and we're just against it, that's exhausting, because frankly, it's just they characterize themselves as the resistance, and it's basically a resistance against any progress. And they use the gentrification nonsense, and they use any tool that they can grab. And to me, it's really dispiriting, because they're not looking about what can we do to build the city. It's what can we do to stop progress. You can find a reason for being against anything. You can find a reason to be against it. But tell me what people always say, and I like to tell people, when they tell you what they're going to do, ask them what they've done. Because I will tell you, the greatest indicator of what they're going to do in the future is what they've done in the past. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think I already know the answer to this question, but I want to ask it anyway. If there was one thing that you could just snap your fingers and change here in the city when it comes to something you'd like to see improved, something you wouldn't need permission, council approval, or any discussion with anybody about, if you could just make a decision and say, hey, this is what I'd like to change and get it done, what would that be?
Yeah, I think if this is a tough answer, because there are honest differences of opinion. But my own belief is, if we had more centralized school control, I think we would have a better city. So we take our high school kids and we send them out to a dozen different high schools all over the county. They get on a bus before they should even be awake, frankly. They're up on a bus going someplace else. We always hear that we need cultural competence in all of our schools. Well, there's only so much cultural competence to go around. So you could do it so much better if you had one or two schools to deal with, instead of saying, let's spread it out all over the place. These things all sound good on paper, but in practice, they don't work. And so I'm not saying this is easy. I'm not saying there are downsides. I said when you look at the competing points of view about whether we need city schools or whether we have to worry more about what's an unfortunate part of segregation, I think on balance, we've tried that, and it's just not working. Our kids in high schools across the county do very poorly. So high school out in one of the districts, 5% of the kids do math at grade level. Well, if it's only 5% of the kids who do math at grade level, let's try Plan B. And Plan B, maybe kids with special needs need special attention. They need tailored programs to help them. I think you can do it better in one place than two. And the other thing, and this is it's a little more subtle, but I have to tell you, kids need they need good, healthy self-identities. Having a high school that everybody identifies with, going to football games and basketball games, you rally around this and the community starts to feel good about itself. But if you splinter them all over the place, and on this side of the street I go to Glasgow, and across the street I go to Newark, and over there I go to AI, nobody really comes together with any sense of common purpose. So I think that I would really like to see us concentrate on getting at least one high school that is predominantly made up of the kids here in the city. I'd like to see us make better use of Howard, which is 25 or 30% vacant, and still not as many city kids as there ought to be. It's a fantastic school. We ought to have more than 25% of the kids coming out of Wilmington itself. To me, they're the things that I would like to see happen. And I know there are 50 different roadblocks to do it, but in 4 more years, and that's the kind of thing I want to see happen. I've been working with Namdi Chikwosha on this thing for some time. Tizzy Lockman, working together in the Reading Consortium, hoping to come together with some major progress in education for our kids in the city.
And I think everyone can appreciate that. Well, look, Mayor, it has been quite the pleasure to interview you. I'm always enlightened as much as I already know about you. I seem to learn more when we have this seat here in the studio to record these interviews. So I appreciate that, and I hope those attending or listening in feel the same.
Okay.
So thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mayor's Corner. I'm Ashley Christopher, and we will see you next time.